Hi, my name is Jessica White, and I'm going to be showing you a little bit of how we've mapped the UK curriculum to what's NODMA, which is a nod to mind advancement, which is basically a STEM teaching resource where you can customize your own books, ebooks, and interactive learning activities, as well as experiments, and we've particularly done it towards the UK curriculum. So I'll just share my screen. So the first thing I wanted to show you, of course, is sort of how we've mapped it. So this is actually for, we did it for two particular resources that we have with Amazon. We did it for apples and we did it for NODMA, and spent a good half a year or more researching before the pandemic, and then suddenly the pandemic hit and we kept going, and we figured out that there were the statutory requirements that were needed to fulfill the learning objectives that students needed to go through and that teachers needed to obviously teach. And so we looked at the different skills and obviously put those in the notes there, and then the statutory requirements here, and mapped it accordingly. So it starts at Key Stage 1. I'm going to go through to actually Key Stage 2. And today I'm going to look at how we did it for year 5 and year 6. So if I just go quickly through here and take you to where we need to go. So we've got year 4, and then we have here year 5. So this is the upper key stages. So year 5 is here. And then we have going through to year 6. Now, we did, as you saw at the beginning, then we did these notes. So it's really important, obviously, with living things and their habitats, that students really understand how things are grouped and the classification and so on, and how those living things are classed into broad groups in common observable characteristics and similarities, as well as plants and animals and living things. And furthermore, we then looked at how this could be mapped in terms of the evolution and inheritance topics. And this is what I'm going to look at now with you. And we recognize that it's really important for students to recognize that living things produce offspring. And it's also important to recognize how plants and animals are adapted to suit their environment, and how pupils might work scientifically. So you can see there in the notes, then it's really about observing and raising questions and looking at the environment. And so NODMA really looks at how you can explore what's going on in the environment when they go outside. But you can actually start that by looking at it on the online resource and then going out into the world and exploring that further. So we'll also be looking at light, which is really exploring how light behaves, where the light sources are, how to make predictions, how to do experiments. And we also obviously linked this up with apples, which I'll show you in another video, but we'll concentrate on NODMA for this. And so you can see the statutory requirements there and how they link to the topic. And as well, we're going to look at electricity and really building upon their work in year 4, and how pupils can be expected to learn about circuits and what happens when a light bulb is blown, and does that source or that flow of electricity then stop, or is it interrupted? And to really kind of understand that and make experiments with that as well. So that's how we mapped it, by doing a lot of research into obviously the UK curriculum, and then what's important for students to learn. And then following on from that, then we looked at several books that we had within NODMA platform. And as you can see here, there's a whole range that you get in your personal library, so full of resources. And here you can see that there were several books that were used for those particular topics. And we supported particularly with, well, let's just take a look. So we've got, first of all, patterns of inheritance. So this was an important topic, as you saw, to go on from the classification of living things. And we looked at this in a previous video, and so I won't go into all the questions and the details and how to use it. It's just really to see how it was mapped to the curriculum. So this is quite a higher level part, which is looking particularly at the genes itself. And, you know, obviously it's a little bit questionable about whether you want to teach that, because students at this level don't necessarily need to know about the genes. But I think this is a really good resource done in a fantastic interactive way using animation and looking back to historical precedents. So it's an introduction to the way that genes, such as the recessive gene and the dominant gene, as we looked at in the other video, really are explored at a very ground basic level, not at the complex level, which then can be done when you get to grammar school. So just to go back to the first page. So one of the resources that we used is this, you know, penguins are so lovable and recognizable. But what's interesting about this is the way in which those animals inherit the traits in which they need to recognize each other, recognize the calls. So, you know, that's a very kind of common theme. So want to introduce something that's recognizable, that's, you know, particularly in the UK, then there is a lot of coverage around penguins. It seems to be something like a lovable mascot or a lovable animal that is, you know, sort of explored within the UK curriculum. So we looked at the context and then made sure that the context fit, and put those resources up there. And then, of course, everybody knows that we're all related. So as much as we don't want to, but we're all related to our ancestors with the monkeys. And it's really interesting to see how they developed, and, you know, how babies look totally different perhaps to their parents. And then that can be, you know, you transfer that knowledge to how that can be used with plants, but then also how that can be used. The adaptation can also be used with parents. So it's really about looking at that transfer of knowledge. With the plant section, then we made sure that it was important to understand a little bit how much the garden is important in the UK, and how students, you know, can actually use this page to go out and explore the leaves themselves in the garden, in their home garden, or if they have allotments, or perhaps, you know, if they want to go to their grandparents or out in the park. So this is a really kind of point of departure for them to go and explore outside, which is fun. So yeah, sorry, oops, move forward this way. So now we looked a little bit at this in the other video where I showed how to use NODMA in collaboration with STEMworks, which is our other platform. But just to let you know, obviously, that this is part of how we mapped to the UK curriculum. You know, obviously, it's important for students to know about genes, and so that's a little bit of an introductory guide there. And going on. So yeah, then we mapped it to how it relates to humans. So students can explore that within class, perhaps by looking at their peers and seeing how that works with, you know, talking about parents, talking about grandparents, and everybody loves puppies, or, you know, also you can do this with cats and checking your pets. And so it's really about, you know, not only how it maps to the curriculum, but also how then that maps to their own kind of environment at home. You know, obviously we spend a lot of time at home since the pandemic, so it's a good chance to kind of explore a little bit what you have in your own environment. So yeah, that's really the basis of how we mapped it to the curriculum. We, you know, obviously wanted to bring in the whole idea of the difference between, say, desert foxes and Arctic foxes, because that also relates to the ways in which, climate change has happened. We did bring in third-party resources to also show a little bit more about Charles Darwin, which is obviously a very important aspect of the British curriculum. He's a historical figure, so we wanted to bring that in and make sure that, that, because obviously it's a big ask within the UK curriculum that students really get to know about historical precedents, and understand how, those scientists actually looked at adaptation and how that leads to evolution, which is a very strong learning objective within the UK curriculum for year 6. So so that's inheritance. And just going back to the book itself, or the books, as it were. So here we are with electricity, and just let it load. So if we look here, then we've got, we talked a little bit about the way that a simple circuit has been represented in year 4, but then they go on to look at series circuits and parallel circuits. So it's that comparison, which is a little bit of a higher level at year 6. It's important that at that level, then students can compare and give reasons for the variations and the components of that function, but also how they can recognize the symbols within a simple circuit, whether that be a series circuit or a parallel circuit, and also how the brightness of the lamp is affected by the different currents and what happens when the currents are weaker, and so the voltage of the cells. So quite a lot more detail there. So we prepared this book specifically for that, which is, was already in NODMA, but we customized it to fit the UK curriculum. And we have here a little bit of, it's important to engage students with some exciting material to begin with. So obviously one of the exciting things that are going on right now is space exploration. And we really looked at, how is the space rocket powered, which, is something that is really, we have Richard Branson, who's gone up in the, on his space flight, it could be linked to that. He's a British entrepreneur. But then there's also, looking at climate change, so how are clean sources of energy, how could those be used instead of fossil fuels? So we really wanted to make sure that there is that context about what's happening now, because obviously we're all facing climate change, and we want to know how we can engage the students to think differently about the way that we use energy. So so we have here really going back to the basics of what is energy, and there is obviously these kind of superheroes that are out there, and we encouraged the students to really look at their own superheroes. Obviously there is a big connection between the UK and the US, so there are some US references there, but that's really an additional kind of enrichment rather than, it doesn't really take away anything. So that's good. And obviously that links to STEMworks, which I looked at in the other video, and how we can use batteries and the introduction to that. So we have here a little bit more about a science project, and going towards solar energy, which is really important, and also the differences between potential, kinetic, electrical, and heat. So that can link to what's going on around the house. Perhaps, some houses might even have solar panels, or be looking into that. So that could be something like a discussion that could be in the class as well. And then really, we mapped these particular learning objectives to what was necessary within the curriculum itself. And these are very specific around the series circuit. And we looked here, so let's just let it load. So what happens when there is a gap in the series circuit, what happens to the electricity flow. And this is really working at the higher level for year 6. And then also looking at the gap in the parallel circuit. So you've got that comparison there, which is important for year 6. And yeah, and then looking at really what happens to that electrical current and the light. Can it still go through those B1 and B2 when the switches are open? So yeah, we've really got into details there, which is absolutely important for the learning objectives in year 6. And the different way that we mapped out the knowledge was by using things like true and false, but also giving a lot more of a explanation so that they can use their own thinking and their own description as well. So it's not only about practice, but it's also about producing your own knowledge and creating meaning. And that way the scientific concepts will become more consolidated in that way. So yeah, so again, true and false, looking at, will the lights light up when the switches are opened? So this is a lot about the switches, which is absolutely important for the learning objectives for year 6 for electricity. And it goes into more detail there. So as you can see, very carefully, we thought about what are those learning objectives? What do students need to learn? Students, particularly in this stage, need to say, I can talk about what is an electrical circuit, but not only what is an electrical circuit, what's the difference between a parallel and a series circuit. And not only that, we gave them an opportunity to draw symbols on the circuit board. So it's really like a chance again for them to create meaning, not only in a written form, but also in a drawing form. So it's using different skills to transfer that knowledge across, which is important for consolidating. Yeah, excuse me. So and then just going back to a summary of what it is about using a circuit card. And filling in the gaps is always quite a good way for students to really think about, what is it about those components that helps them to think, okay, what are the components of this circuit board? What happens when I do this? What happens when I do that? If I do this, what happens? So it's really that processing, that inquiry-based learning, which is really important. Okay. So that's about electricity. And then going back to the books that we used, then one of the other requirements for the UK curriculum is to look at light. So it's really about exploring the way that light behaves and what happens. Can we recognize that light appears to travel in straight lines, and what happens when it doesn't? And when it goes through objects. So why shadows are there, and why can they have the same shape as the objects that cast them? So really kind of like getting to the foundational concepts and inquiry-based learning, discovery learning, instead of just saying, okay, these things are as they are because that's how it is. It's really about investigation at this level, and really questioning your environment, questioning what you see around you. Which really will help students in the future to think about not just taking things at face value, but also investigating into the world around them, which is the basis of thinking scientifically. So yeah, so you've got 4 different books there, and they're all being explored, light being explored in different ways. And so So leading with questions, then it looks like, you know, why are we able to see through some objects but not others? And what are the reasons for that? And then you can explore this with the STEM Works learning objectives. But then it's also really time to allow students to have time to reflect upon these and, you know, think about their answers. And, you know, that will create a cause for discussion within the class. So, you know, obviously before going into all the light topics, then it's important to think about what is transparent, what is translucent, what is opaque, you know, and what's the difference, and then using that investigation further with the learning objectives from STEMworks. So as you can see, it's just a matter of going through, transferring that knowledge, using presentation of major concepts, but then really kind of thinking about it, reflecting about it, and seeing if you can actually do the experiments yourself. So here we have like a little story about the way that Susie is, she's stuck in her room with the door closed, and there's material her door should be made out of so no one can see what she's doing in her room. What is that material? What is it? Opaque? Is it translucent? Is it transparent? So it's reproducing that knowledge, but then also you can think about your own room and what do you have in your own room that stops, you know, the light coming in, or what do you have in your own room that allows the light to come through. So yeah, and then just to review and really to think about the environment around you. So that's just a short review of how we mapped that to the curriculum. And, you know, of course, you can go into the different topics and the way that, you know, you can think like an engineer and think like a reflective scientist. So yeah, I hope that's helped and giving you an idea of how we mapped it to the curriculum in the UK, and, you know, the important factors of not only learning the foundational concepts, but also practicing those and then reflecting upon it and then reproducing it and discussing or doing those experiments on your own in your own home. Okay, thanks for listening.